Okay, let us begin. Welcome back once again. Today is going to be an open talk. Let's begin by giving you our defined goals, what we'd like to discuss, and what we'd like to answer. We begin by discussing the evangelical prophecy of helping the greater Israel. Many of you already know, so we're not giving you a history lesson of what the evangelicals believe about helping Israel build the third temple so that Christ returns and converts the remaining Jews into Christians. We're not here to give you a history lesson about that, but we'd like to shed light on how did that belief system, how did that twisted ideology within the Republican Party grow to become prominent, to become the driving force, to psyop half of America who are slowly waking up to the Zionist plots and plans, to psyop half of Americans to vote for them. So we are attempting to shed light on this evangelical movement. Where did it come from? Where is it likely going? And ultimately, how did it psyop all these people to believe, to stand behind it? The second question, the second point we would like to answer and we're going to discuss is this entity called the United Nations, which comes out and says we were created to stabilize international peace. And basically, we are going to discuss how the United Nations is going to fall. It is going to be defeated. The United Nations is only there to manipulate certain countries which are becoming powerful to adhere to certain laws which the big players don't adhere to. What kind of system of government governs itself, and the bodies which created it have the power to veto, even if the majority of countries come out and say, we're against this. The powerful countries that created the United Nations have the power to say no. And all the power line. What kind of system is that? Doesn't make sense. So we are going to explain that system to you. And we are going to explain how the United Nations will come to fall, to collapse, and countries will no longer be a part of the United. There will be a new entity arising, claiming world peace. The third item on our agenda is going to be Iran preparing for true promise 4. Iran preparing for war with Israel once again. Many of you will say, well, how could that be? Didn't Israel and Gaza reach a ceasefire? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What happened was, once again, the Sunni government, the Arab governments, the leaders within these Sunni populated governments sold Hamas out. They sold the Palestinians out. And because they couldn't get a deal, they decided to break the deal up into first phase, let's just release the hostage. Second phase, which we haven't even agreed on, but second phase, we'll talk about who governs Palestine, and Hamas fell for it. Now, Hamas fell for it because their hands were tied. Because recently, after Qatar was attacked, Hamas was told by Qatar, by Turkey, by Egypt, by all countries that they communicate with, that this is your last chance. Because Donald Trump pressured Qatar prior to giving them a new deal. Donald Trump pressured the Turkish president, the Freemason Erdogan. And he told them, listen, you might have factions over here, factions of Hamas leaders over there. You go to them and you tell them, you better accept this first phase of the deal. We'll work out the necessary details for the second phase, but this is your last chance. Otherwise, we're just going to kill the Palestinian people, and blood is really going to be on your hand. That's it. We're done. We're going to put the Palestinians in buses if we have to, and we're going to ship them out. And coming from Trump, that's kind of easy to blow off. But coming from Arab Muslim leaders, Hamas in Iran was forced to acknowledge that the best thing to do right now is to show the world that we will release the hostages, allow them to claim that peace was made, and if they, the Americans, the Zionists, decide to come and start bombing Gaza all over again, the whole world will uh, no longer question, no longer uh, assume that the Zionists and the Americans are pushing for peace. So again, we're here to show you, where does Iran fit in to this peace deal, which is complete psyop. I know recently Israel came out and reached out to Putin or Russia to say, hey, why don't you tell your buddies Iran that we're no longer at war? Well, that's a strategy, because Israel is no longer getting security intel. Israel is no longer getting intelligence reports, because all of the leaders of the Iranian Islamic Republic of Iran are now hiding. They're nowhere to be found. Mossad can't locate these generals anymore. So the best thing that we can do as Israel is tell Russia to tell Iran, we're no longer at war. Why don't you guys get out of your shelters and just go about your day normally, so that we can bomb you when you least expect it. Because as of right now, us, Mossad, we don't even have the intel to find these generals anymore. These generals went hiding after we assassinated the most recent bomb campaign in Iran, the 12-day war. We assassinated scientists and generals, and now they're all hiding. Well, we can't assassinate anymore if they're hiding. So why don't we go tell Russia, hey, we're at peace now. All of a sudden, we're at peace. Let them come out. So that's the main driving force behind the peace deal of Gaza and the peace between Israel and Iran. It doesn't exist. It's a strategy. And we want to discuss, since we're going to start off by discussing the evangelical belief that Jesus Christ will return, let us discuss how Jesus Christ will return. And I think many of you will find this to be very surprising, because when we have conversations amongst the Muslim community, what's left of it, of course, amongst the Christian community, okay, there are differing beliefs about what role does Jesus play when he comes back. And how is he supposed to come back? Is this something in our hand, or is this something in their hand? What does this look like? What does this prophecy look like? And we have a different view. And I think our view is a logical view, so we're going to share that with you. Prior to getting started, let us be thankful to God for giving us another day. As many of you are aware, we are living in a time where entropy, which is disorder, simply put, disorder in this universe is rapidly increasing. And like our last episode, which discussed how observation has been hijacked, we are facing not only a physical and spiritual dilemma, okay, but we are also participating in this destruction of our universe. These satanic individuals believe, these oppressors believe, that when all's said and done and we return during Judgment Day, we're not going to be the only ones held responsible. You are. You are, because we told you. Because us Satanists, we can't lie to you. We have to tell you the truth. That's why the government allows these circulating conspiracy theories of landing on the moon, of 9/11 being an inside job, of the JFK assassination. The government does control the web. They can put a flag interrupt variable and completely cut off any conspiracy theory from spreading. But they don't. Why? Because it is a part of not lying to you. This is what Satanists believe. Satanists believe that if they do not lie to you, then you will be held responsible. So we're facing a physical and a spiritual dilemma, a problem. And your observation has been hijacked because you have taken a bite from the forbidden fruit, like your forefather Adam. We discussed that in our second episode called Observation Hijacked. When you flip your phone around, there is a logo of a bitten apple, indicating that you and the knowledge which you get is coming from this phone and it is forbidden. What does that mean? Throw your phone away? Not necessarily. We discussed possible solutions to this. We discussed that it's not about throwing your phone away. Instead, maybe not scrolling, because the algorithm is your lord if you scroll. You do not know what you're choosing to come into your psyche while you're scrolling. Now, many of you watch what you eat, but you could care less about the feed. You go to the gym, you work out, you try to stay healthy, you eat good food, but when it comes to social media, which is completely free and it's easy, both signals and signs that you should really be careful. Food isn't free, going to the gym isn't free, and none of them are easy. Having a clean diet is not easy. Going to the gym on a daily or consistent basis is not easy. But scrolling is easy. And both of those are not free. But scrolling, oh, it's free. As long as you have a phone and internet connection, you can go down to a McDonald's for all, homeless people have phones nowadays. Just go down, connect to the internet, and just scroll away. Download Instagram. We discussed how they bypass critical thinking in our episode 2. Let us begin, my friends. How did the evangelical prophecy infiltrate the Republican Party, starting with Mr. Reagan? And now it seems like these white Christians who claim that they're Christ-fearing Christians, adhering to Christianity, but blowing and decapitating the heads of Palestinians at what? Let's just fulfill the prophecy. That's what they say behind closed doors. Where did this prophecy come from? The evangelical prophecy came from one of the best, most logical changes to the Christian religion. The Christian church, my friends, if you read about Christian history, the Christian church controlled the thinking of the Christians. They told the Christians, you do not and you cannot understand what God said in his book entitled the Bible. Leave that to us. We will tell you what the Bible means and what it says. You just come to us, confess, pay charity, and let us do the heavy lifting, Until a man named Martin Luther came and started the Protestant Reform, which, when you look at it, when you study it, you say, wow, this is awesome. He claimed that God does not belong to the church. The church should not be telling us what God means in his book. This book is for us. This book, God is for me as much as he is for you, as much as he is for the church. God doesn't go through the church to go to me, and I don't need to go to the church to go to God. So Martin Luther started a revolution within the Christian community. And that revolution was read your Bible. I wonder how many Christians nowadays read their Bible. I wonder how many Muslims nowadays read their Quran. Oh, we're too busy. That's what we tell ourselves. Let us continue. This Protestant movement sparked an intellectual revolution within the Christian religion, which still has not come to the Muslims. They call it the Islamic Golden Age. Today we are in the Islamic Dark Ages, because you have the majority of Muslims listening to the church or the mosque or their sheikh, not reading their Quran. And then you have other sources outside of the Quran contradicting the Quran completely. Most Muslims nowadays will actually make the claim that there is only one version of the Quran, which is completely false. Most Muslims, if you ask them, what is the first chapter of the Quran, they will tell you, well, Surat al-Fatiha, the opener. And that's completely false. Because these Muslims are sheep. They need a Martin Luther. They need a Protestant reform within their own religious community, which they call the Ummah. But before we get to the sheep, the slave, the idiotic Muslim, put him to the side. Let him do his own thing. We are worried about the intellectual, the Christian, and how his intellect has been hijacked. But before it was hijacked, the intellectual revolution came from the Christian. The intellectual revolution pushed by Martin Luther, who told the Christians it is our duty to read our book and study our book. After the Protestant movement came, notable scientific discoveries followed. One of which, an individual named Isaac Newton. You ever heard of Isaac Newton? Now you're going to say, Isaac Newton, he's a scientist, a physicist, a mathematician. Absolutely garbage. None of what school told you is true. I don't know if you've caught up to this by now. You've been indoctrinated, and it is your job, your duty to break out of that indoctrination. I will do my best to possibly point at certain categories of indoctrination, and that is on you to do the research. Back to Mr. Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a theologian, meaning he studied God, religion, and he studied his Bible. Today, if we had an Isaac Newton around us, we would call him a schizophrenic. We would call him a schizophrenic because basically what he was doing is he would read the Bible and he believed that the Bible had codes, secret codes, God trying to tell us something indirectly. And Isaac Newton pushed for this prophecy or this idea of us being able to control the will of what happens to us. Our fate is in our hands. It's not always up to the fate of God and the will of God. We need to also do something. Okay? And actually, Isaac Newton thought and prophesied that the world would end by 2060. 2060. Interesting. Where did he come up with those numbers? Actually, the History Channel created a short film about this. And they showed how Newton came up with these numbers. But that confirms, the History Channel will confirm for you, and you can do your own independent research, that Isaac Newton thought that the world was going to end by 2060. And he believed Jesus would come back. That pushed for scientific discoveries which serve us today. However, that infiltrated the minds of the Christian. The Christian now thought it was up to him to fulfill this prophecy. This is actually why, when you look at the American Western belief system, one of the prophecies of the founding fathers, okay, and this is why they fled Europe, because they didn't want to be controlled by the church. One of the belief system or major prophecies that they believed that they ought to fulfill, and it was in their control, was to take over Southern America and Northern America. So a lot of these political changes around that time, the 16th, 17th, 18th century, came from the reform of Martin Luther, who, again, when you look at what he was saying, how can anyone disagree that it's up to them to read their own Bible and think about it? Fast forward, and we shouldn't fast forward, but we're going to fast forward because we have other subjects that we have to discuss. Fast forward from Martin Luther starting the Protestant reform to Isaac Newton coming in and discovering certain things within the Bible which pushed for a prophecy to be fulfilled, one of which being that Jews need to return to the state of Israel. And now in comes American politics. And American politics on the left, on the right, we know that they support the state of Israel. So before you go and you question why is Trump supporting the Israelis or why did Obama or Joe Biden support the Israelis, this is the foundation. It is fundamental. It is the basic building blocks of this country because this country was founded on Christian Protestant beliefs. That was the core of the founding fathers. And it is our duty as Americans to follow this belief system, which allowed us to escape the church from Britain. We fought wars to bring and now some people from Iraq and Lebanon want to come, or Americans that are not educated on the American history want to come and tell us we don't want to serve Israel. Of course, it sounds ridiculous to Pete Hegseth and the Speaker of the House and Donald Trump. So you must understand that there is no stopping Israel. You cannot stop Israel. To stop Israel means to stop America. And why would you want to stop your own country? What are you, ridiculous? You'd have to be ridiculous to go against your own country. Because within the foundations of the Constitution, within the basic mechanism which we all adhere to, there's some good and there's some pretty ugly stuff in there. America was built on Protestant reform, which honestly sounds great. Read your own Bible. But now that people did that, they intertwined their interpretation of these verses within the Bible, which say those who bless Israel, God blesses them, or God loves those who bless Israel. Of course, Israel is a man known as Jacob, but no, that just no. We don't want to interpret it like that. We want to interpret it by the Israel that was founded less than 100 years ago. We want to refer to that Israel. And remember, my friends, before we go to our second topic, America doesn't like Israel. That's not their role. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party don't like Israel. What they want to do is they want to build the state of Israel. Okay? And then they want to turn all of you against the Jews. Because the state of Israel needs all Jewish people from all over the world to reside there. Not in New York and California and Florida and other parts of America and other parts of Europe. So hatred for Jewish people is on the rise, which is also serving the prophecy. There's no point of building up Israel if the Jews living abroad are just living lavishly. Why we ought to. We have to make everyone hate the Jews so that the Jews return to Israel, but we also have to build Israel. Make Israel strong. A sick and twisted fantasy. Prophecy. What role, we're going to our second topic, what role does the United Nations play? You know, the United Nations, which was created, again, less than 100 years ago, after World War II, after the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki dropped. Here comes the Soviet Union, France, United Kingdom, United States, and Britain, major powers. And here they go talking about what they were the ones that literally dropped more bombs than anybody else. Here they come and they say, we are here to build an entity which governs the international body and hopes to spread peace. Baloney. It's complete baloney. And the system in and of itself is prejudice. What's the point of having other nations and having them vote if you have the power to veto? Makes no sense. So what role does the United Nations play? Is that even a question anymore? Let me just go over the bodies of the United Nations. You have the UN General Assembly, okay? The UN International Court of Justice. That's the one I was looking for. The International Court of Justice. You would think that the International Court of Justice, if that's strong, if nations adhere to that, then you can't question the merit of the United Nations. But we saw during the Gaza conflict, the United Nations came out and labeled the tactics of Israel as genocidal. The International Court ruled against Netanyahu. There's an arrest warrant, and nothing's happening. So what's the point of the United Nations? How could there be international law and no one, including America, okay, especially the founders of the United Nations, the founders of the United Nations don't care about the United Nations because they don't have to play by the rules. Everybody else has to play by the rules. Really, it's governing the weak. It's a psyop. And that's why they are commingled with the World Economic Forum. Because prior to building up Israel and then ushering the Jewish people from all over the world because they're facing anti-Semitism, ushering them into Israel, there's going to be a World War III. Absolutely. And then the United Nations will fall, and we will create a new body of governing international policies and international law and international bodies. But that's after World War III. We need to get there first because the 2060 vision of Isaac Newton must come to be true. Who better to explain the Bible to us than Isaac Newton? And you're sitting here telling me about Theodore Herzl, who created Zionism. Well, that doesn't, he was an atheist. The guy is helping the Masonic prophecies. What is the Freemason? Besides a cult or religion who involves themselves in Epstein Island and other items which we're not going to discuss so that they can blackmail each other. Because the best way to keep a secret, by the way, is for me and you to indulge in becoming pedophiles, drinking blood and having sex with the same, and then recording each other and then, don't tell, I won't tell. If you actually look at what most people fear, it's actually not spiders. It's not being bombed. It's not being shot. It's being annihilated in the public's image. Breaking news, Michael Jackson is now a pedophile. Wow. Would you look at that? After he dies, they tell us he's a pedophile. Interesting. They don't really care about us. So the United Nations plays absolutely no role except to deceive the rest of the nations which adhere to international law. And those who control the United Nations, those who founded the United Nations, do not respect the United Nations. Recently, Trump, when he went to the United Nations, made fun of them. They turned off his teleprompter. It makes you think for just a second that how could America be anti-United Nations if the United Nations did that to Trump? Because Trump is not America. Trump is a puppet from Epstein Island who we put in play because we need the American people to indulge in the psyop. We can't continue giving them boring leaders. The American people have been stimulated. They got sports, they have MMA, they have UFC, they have boxing, they have Call of Duty. So don't give them boring presidents. Give them shock and awe. If they hate him, that's fine, but they're still participating. How many people voted this year? More than any time in the history of America. That's a good sign. That means our psyop is working. So don't think just because Donald Trump went and he has beef with the United Nations, doesn't matter. Donald Trump doesn't control America. He's just there to fulfill a certain role. Who's next? I promise you it's going to be worse than Donald Trump. Recently, the imbecile Donald Trump came out and claimed that he was a peacemaker. This God fearing man claimed that he was a peacemaker because he brokered a deal between the Gazans and Israel. Finally, who would have thought thousands of years, and I'm the peacemaker, you're not the peacemaker, war is continuing. The Palestinians are now completely doomed. They were sold out by the Sunni world. I am no Shiite, but I will tell you, I respect the Shiite because the Shiite is closer to his religion than the sheep mentality of the Sunni. You see, the Sunni is a sheephead. Bah! He follows what his commander tells him. He's like the Catholics. He doesn't read his own book. And the Shiite, he's a guerrilla. Why? He just beats his chest. But who do you respect more? The sheep or the gorilla? Let the Shiite beat his chest and cut his head open if that means having some sense of decency and some framework where we can work with it, Well, we gotta stop oppression because Imam Hussein was oppressed. Sure, that makes sense. Unlike the Sunni, well, we are not allowed to question our government, okay? I don't know why the Sunni now is a hillbilly, but we're not allowed to question our government. Us, the Sunnis, we're not allowed to question our government. Let me ask you something. Didn't your prophet literally stand against the government of the polytheists? Well, they weren't Muslim. And what is Mohammed bin Salman? What is El-Sisi? So you have Iran, who are not even Arab, this is why I respect the Persian mind, who are literally fighting against Satan. Iran, if it wasn't for Iran, there would be no Islam, except by title and face value. There would be no value within the Ummah, as they call it. What a horrible, sickening version of reality. Oh, there's a hadith about that, right? These people don't even understand that 99% of their hadiths were thrown out, deemed not real by whom? Bukhari himself. Bukhari himself threw out 99% of the hadith. So did Muslim, and so did the other scholars who came hundreds of years after the Prophet to tell us what the Prophet said. And who cares about the Prophet? The Prophet is dead. Don't you understand? We're not here to pray to a man. He was a good man and he fulfilled his mission. And his fate is with his creator. Why don't we read our own book? No. Leave it to the sheikh to interpret it. Leave it to Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa on YouTube to tell me about Islam. Leave it to Shamsi on Speaker's Corner to tell us that we're not allowed to speak out against our government who's shaking hands with Israel as Israel's decapitating the Palestinians. Where does that lead us? Well, that leads us to the building up of the new war between Iran and Palestine. And the Sunnis, the ones that follow the terrorists in Syria, the Sunnis are hoping deep down in their subconscious, even though it's really their conscious, but let's call it subconscious because we don't want to think they're that disgusting. The Sunnis are now hoping that Iran loses. Iran is not to be called our brothers in the Ummah. No, these are Shiites. They hit themselves and pray to Al-Hussein. When Israel bombs Al-Aqsa and blames it on Iran's missiles, when Israel bombs Al-Aqsa and blames it on Iranian missiles, what is going to be the response of the Sunnis? What do you think? Do you think the Sunnis are going to point fingers at Israel or point fingers at Iran? Why the Sunnis were involved in killing the family of the Prophet. Why wouldn't they turn against Iran? They're silent when their Palestinian Sunni brothers are being decapitated and bombed to pieces. But they will be very vocal when Al-Aqsa Mosque is bombed and Israel plays the game that they played when the Druze in Israel, a small community within Israel, was bombed while their sons were playing soccer. And who did the Israelis blame? Well, they blamed Hezbollah. Tactics. Horrible tactics by the Israelis that the Sunnis will soon fall for because they are sheep. They take orders. Name one Sunni government today who's not a plant by Mossad or America or Britain. True Promise 4. Recently, Israel comes out and has a word with Russia, and I am urging the Iranians to be careful and be cautious from the Russians. The Russians are not to be trusted. The Russians have given us weapons, correct, but they are in bed with the Zionists. They are in bed with the United Nations. They are in bed with the World Economic Forum. They are just, they're doing whatever, they're playing the game of survival of the fittest. We'll play all sides because we need something from Iran, but we can't go against Israel. That's crazy. Go against Israel. Why? We're in bed with Israel. So I'm urging the Iranians to just be careful because during the 12-day war, Russia didn't come to help you. Why? You have a better shot going to the Chinese. Because at least the Chinese are a bunch of atheists, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but nowadays you can trust the atheists because the atheist simply believes in value. How many nations, how many wars has China fought? How many nations has China invaded? How many bombs has China dropped on any country in the last 20, 30, 40 years? But to Iran, I urge them, play the game. You know, you guys were the founders of chess. You guys also have a lot of history. The Persian mind is a great mind. Why don't you play the game for once? I get it. You have all these morals and True Promise 1, you couldn't kill any Israeli civilians. True Promise 2, you couldn't kill them. True Promise 3, you couldn't kill them. Why? The only time you killed anyone was when one of your ballistic missiles fell and killed a Palestinian because it malfunctioned or something. And I'm sure an Israeli or two died in the 12-day war because there's the Mossad's secret bunkers are actually, ironically, under hospitals and children's centers, as they blamed Hamas for doing it. But Iran, I understand the strategy you're playing here. You hope America invades you because you can't get tanks over that terrain. You know damn well the American base doesn't want to go to war, and you're hoping to do asymmetric warfare with the United States, and you will defeat the United States if it comes to that. But at what cost? At what cost? What do you want to see happen exactly before you understand that you need to completely be the aggressor at this point? Do you need to learn game theory? Do you need Khamenei to be killed? True Promise 4 is going to hurt the Iranian people. You know, in American baseball, we have 3 strikes. 1, 2, 3, you're out. We don't keep playing this game to the point where, look at what Israel thinks of Iran. Israel thinks Iran is so stupid to believe that they no longer want to go to war. So what does Israel do? Tell Russia, hey, why don't you tell the Iranians we're no longer at war? Why do you think Israelis did that? Because they can't locate any more generals or scientists to assassinate. They're all hiding. That's how dumb Israel is. But also, an indication of how stupid the Israelis think the Iranians are. Well, why would they think that the Iranians are so stupid? Perhaps it's because the Iranians are actually allowing us to assassinate left and right, and in response, they think that asymmetric warfare is going to be their ultimate victory. How do you know you're going to get there? How do you know you're going to get to the point where America invades your land? That's just not the fact. The fact is you need to put America in a position to have to invade you. Not play this game where, you know what, maybe it's best if we call America before we strike their bases in Qatar. No. You strike, and you strike them hard, and you strike them where they don't see it coming, and they'll be forced to answer. And you hide like you do, okay? And then they have to get in there. But what do you want to see happen? Another 55 generals get assassinated, another 75 scientists get assassinated, your supreme leader get assassinated, and then the replacement of the supreme leader also get assassinated? Why, that'd be ridiculous to think that, well, we could still play it cool and calm and collected. You have the right to be the aggressor. Take it. Opportunity comes and it goes. True Promise 4, be careful because you will have the Sunnis turning on you when Al-Aqsa is dropped. How does Christ return? Considering everything we said, please listen, especially to this point. Christ is not going to return over a small conflict happening in Palestine between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Why, that would be a very biased Lord for him to send Jesus back at the time where there's a conflict amongst tens of millions of people. When you have 7 trillion people. Christ, when he returns, it's to fulfill a prophecy that takes place all over the world, not just in the Middle East, which means oppression is not only going to exist in Gaza. The whole world must be under an oppressive regime. Why do you think we've given you this list of what role does the United Nations play? True Promise 4 and bombing Al-Aqsa. The Masonic agenda intertwined with the evangelicals stemming from the Protestant movement of building up Israel. Because the whole thing it's based on Christ returning. We want to usher in Christ. We want him to return. And when the World Economic Forum and globalism takes over after World War III and puts China, America, Europe, Africa, you name it, all nations from all continents, all parts of the world, when they put them in a system of financial methods, okay, everybody's now using the same finances. Inflation affects everyone in the world at a stupid rate. Freedom is now stripped away from the common folk. You need a one world government for Christ to return, because then it would be that one world government fighting against Christ, and Christ would be the representative of the Chinese as much as the Palestinian, as much as the Iranian, as much as the moral, ethical American, as well as the Brazilian, as well as the Ukrainian. You need a common enemy. There's too many factors going on for you to believe that Christ will return. Now, over what? Over a bunch of Jews. 8 million of them. 15 million of them. After everything we've went through from his resurrection up until now, you're telling me now is the best time for Christ to return over a conflict in the Middle East between the Jewish state of Israel and Iran. Why that's retarded. It's obviously more likely that Christ is going to return when, number one, we least expect it. When belief in God is at an all-time low. When people have seen too much and now they just gave up. Nothing excites them. We're all zombies. And there's a few elite, all the way at the top, controlling everything, and every now and then they psyop, and they've pushed us away from God. Because at this point, God should have intervened. I mean, it's so bad, God should have intervened. And then when Christ comes back, that's when the people who have been oppressed from all parts of the world will unite to fight the enemy, being really Satan. I mean, who's behind the Freemasons? Who's behind the Satanists? Who's behind the evil people? Envy, greed, jealousy, hatred, lust. Well, it's Satan. He whispers to them and he tells them, listen, I can make you rich and whatnot. I have a video for you. I want to show you recently, and I think we'll end on this. Recently on Air Force One, reporters go to Trump and they ask him about going to heaven and his belief or something around those lines. And you know what Donald Trump says? I don't think someone like me can make it into heaven. Now, let me ask you, oh, Mr. Christian, what kind of individual, what kind of Christian, what kind of God-fearing person, whether he's Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, anyone who believes in anything besides himself, they all believe in the mercy and forgiveness of this higher entity. They all believe we all make mistakes. But what kind of person would make the claim that I cannot be forgiven? Why, it's the guy who has transgressed beyond the limits that God has set. Take a look at this video of Donald Trump and what he says about heaven and if he's going to heaven. I mean, this is sick.
It'd be a little cute. I don't think there's anything going to get me in heaven. Okay, I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I may be in heaven right now as we fly in Air Force One. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven, but I've made life a lot better for a lot of people. And you know, as an example, had the election of 2020 not been rigged, you would have millions of people living just in Russia, Ukraine alone. That would have never happened. And it didn't happen for 4 years. And I knew Putin very well. It was the apple of his eye. All the things I've said would have never happened. We had an incompetent administration. We had an incompetent president. And because of a crooked election, millions of people are dead. And by the way, the Israeli thing was much harder to get settled because of the best administration. Okay? You know, I'm being a little cute.
I'm being a little cute. I don't think there's anything that's going to get me in heaven. I really don't. I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. What kind of person would say that besides the guy who has transgressed beyond all limits, slept with young children, and the most recent government shutdown? You know, it's about releasing the Epstein files. And this is going to last. I mean, they really don't want these files out there because there's something in there that will definitely shed light on who Donald Trump is, along with a lot of other people. And remember, what was Epstein? It was to make sure that when we allow you into this cult, okay, you don't run away and start snitching on our prophecies that we wish to be fulfilled. And we will make you the president of the United States because you will play your role and we'll give you what you want. I mean, what does Donald Trump want? To be liked. He's a narcissist. Go to episode 2 to understand narcissist, which really is narcissus. Yes, you heard me right. Narcissus. I think we're going to end there. Like I said, you must understand that this is the will of God. And is there something you can do? Absolutely. But you're not willing to suffer and you're not willing to have a spiritual journey. So I think I'm going to let you believe that there's nothing you can do. And by the way, just to tell you one more thing. By believing there's nothing you can do, you literally fell into the trap of the state. The state wants you to feel powerless. The state wants you to feel like there's nothing you can do, that you're overpowered. And by believing there's nothing you can do, you're absolutely right. Well, okay, without the sarcasm, what's there to do, genius? Like I said, I'm gonna leave that to you. But let me hint at something. To harm anyone is not required. Jesus, Muhammad, Abraham, Jacob, these people didn't go out and kill. So, but their names remained, and they had a very impactful life that outlived them, and their purpose outlived them. So, figure out your own method, but understand that you could potentially be thrown in prison just like Joseph, the son of Jacob. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing? Do you have the patience for that? Make sure you subscribe. We have a lot of information coming out. We're going to discuss different topics, number one, as they unfold and as they relate to the historical patterns which have unfolded. So be sure to subscribe. Thanks.